Welcome back. Today's explainer is laser-focused on a critical exam area, NCP-MCI 7.5, Objective 3.4, changing an AHV host's IP, mask, or gateway. If you're an infrastructure administrator gearing up for this certification, you already know that managing core network configs is absolutely non-negotiable. It isn't just about passing a multiple-choice test, right? It's about making sure your Nutanix clusters actually stay healthy and keep communicating long after that initial imaging process is done. So we're going to dive deep into the baseline AOS 7.5 and AHV 11.0 documentation to give you the exact supported procedures for these modifications.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover why this topic matters, walk through changing IP settings, walk through VLAN configuration, exam traps and edge cases, and finally, key facts to memorize.
Section 1. Why this topic actually matters.
Now, before we hit the command line, let's just quickly establish our shared vocabulary so we're all speaking the exact same language. I know you know these, but let's be thorough. AHV is the Acropolis hypervisor, Nutanix's native virtualization solution. The CVM, the controller virtual machine, well, that's the absolute brain of the storage and control plane running on every single host. OVS stands for Open vSwitch, which handles our Layer 2 virtual switching. And then we've got our two primary tools for today. NMCLI, the Network Manager CLI, which we use natively on the Linux-based AHV host itself, and ACLI, the Acropolis CLI, which we run from the CVM to manage the whole cluster-wide virtualization fabric.
It is super important to understand right out of the gate that changing a host's IP, mask, or gateway is a high-risk operation. You are not just clicking a friendly little UI toggle here. When a node is first imaged, its networking parameters are laid down as the absolute foundation of its identity. Changing them later, that raises the stakes considerably. If you make a mistake, or honestly, if you just perform the steps out of order, you can completely isolate a node. Breaking that Layer 2 or Layer 3 communication severs the CVM from the hypervisor and the rest of the cluster, and that means immediate downtime. The exam is going to test your ability to do this safely, methodically, and correctly.
Moving on to Section 2. Walkthrough. Changing IP settings.
We are anchoring this entire walkthrough directly in the official AHV 11.0 host network management documentation. No guesswork here, this is the exact supported Nutanix methodology. When we talk about modifying these core network settings, what we're actually doing is editing the settings of the default Open vSwitch bridge, that's BR0, and its associated ports.
But hold up, before you even think about typing a single command, you have to verify one massive prerequisite. The AHV admin guide states it loud and clear. Ensure that all controller VMs and hypervisor hosts are on the same subnet. Seriously, I cannot overstate how critical this is. Ignoring this is a guaranteed path to failure in a real data center, and it's a guaranteed missed question on the exam. They absolutely must exist in the same broadcast domain to function correctly.
Okay, assuming that subnet prerequisite is met, here is your operational sequence. Step 1. Log on to the host console as the root user. And pro tip here, because you're changing the very IP address you might otherwise SSH into, you really should do this via IPMI, the out-of-band management console. Otherwise, you're just going to saw off the branch you're sitting on and drop your own connection mid-change. Step 2. Update the network entries using NMCLI. And Step 3. Apply and start that new connection using the command NMCLI con up. Let's actually look at the exact syntax for that.
Getting this specific string right is make or break. To target the default bridge directly on the host, you're going to type NMCLI con modify BR0 IPv4.addresses, followed by a space, the new IP address, and its subnet prefix length, so something like /24 or /21. Then, right there in that same line, you append IPv4.gateway and the new gateway IP. Once you hit enter on that, you run NMCLI con up BR0 to bring the bridge back up with its shiny new settings. It's an elegant command, but, it requires absolute precision.
All right, Section 3. Walkthrough, VLAN configuration.
Taking a look under the hood at this XML dump from the hypervisor, we can see the underlying virtual port layout. It perfectly illustrates how the virtual port integrates straight into the Open vSwitch bridge, BR0. See, when we assign a VLAN tag to an AHV host, we aren't just slapping a tag on a physical NIC. We are actively modifying exactly how the Open vSwitch handles the traffic for that specific host interface.
The procedure for VLANs is a really logical continuation of what we just did with the IPs. First, we modify the OVS port mode to access and assign our new VLAN tag. Second, we verify that the tag actually stuck correctly using the nmcli-f command to spit out the connection details. And third, just like our last example, we apply the changes by bringing the connection up. But, and this is a big but, notice the target here isn't just BR0, it is specifically OVS port -BR0.
And here's the exact syntax you're going to want to memorize for the exam. NMCLI con modify OVS port BR0, OVS port.tag, followed by the actual VLAN ID number. Then you add OVS port.VLAN mode access. To apply it, you run NMCLI con up OVS port BR0. See the pattern? The NMCLI tool is super consistent, but the critical distinction here is knowing to target OVS port BR0 for the VLAN rather than just the bridge itself.
Let's pivot to Section 4, Exam Traps and Edge Cases.
Okay, listen up, because this is a classic exam trap. They love to test if you know the difference between these two command line toolsets. First, NMCLI. That is a Linux networking tool. You run it as root directly on the physical AHV host to change the host's IP, gateway, or VLAN tags. Second, ACLI. That's the Acropolis CLI. You run that from the CVM to update the entire cluster's awareness of what you just did. After you change a host IP, you absolutely must log into a CVM and run ACLI net.update virtual switch to tell the virtual switch, hey, here are the new host IP addresses and the new gateway. Confusing where to run these commands, host versus CVM, is probably the #1 mistake candidates make.
Now let's look at a couple of operational edge cases you might run into. First, if your cluster has network segmentation enabled, meaning your backplane traffic is isolated from your management traffic, you absolutely 100% must disable it before attempting to change CVM or host IPs. The security guide is super strict about this. Disable it, make your IP changes, then re-enable it. Second edge case. When you run that ACLI net.update virtual switch command we just covered, it updates nodes one by one. In a really large cluster, that rolling process can take over 20 minutes. So the rule there is, avoid any other network-related activities during that window so you don't cause database corruption or task interference. Just let it finish.
Here's a hyper-specific edge case that frankly loves to show up as a distractor question. If you're doing network changes because a physical NIC was replaced, keep in mind that swapping that NIC resets its receive and transmit ring buffers straight back to default values. If you need to restore optimized buffer sizes, say bumping them back up to 1024, using the net.update host NIC command, well, fair warning, that operation is going to reboot the AHV host and it might reserve additional kernel memory. So always be prepared for that host to bounce.
Section 5, Key Facts to Memorize. Take a mental screenshot of this list right here. These are the 4 absolute non-negotiable facts you need from today. Number 1, CVMs and hypervisor hosts must share the same subnet. Number 2, you use NMCLI, logged in as root directly on the AHV host to actually execute those host IP and VLAN changes. Number 3, you use ACLI from the CVM to update the virtual switch config so the cluster actually knows about the changes you just made. And number 4, always disable network segmentation before initiating IP changes on your hosts or CVMs.
And I'm going to leave you with this final thought to take into the exam room, or frankly into your data center tonight. Are your controller VMs and hypervisor hosts on the exact same subnet before you press enter? If you can confidently answer yes to that, and follow the sequence we outlined today, you are well on your way to mastering AHV network management. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. Best of luck on that NCP-MCI 7.5 certification. Keep studying, stay focused, and I'll catch you in the next one.